Thank you everyone for joining to talk through, I guess, our 11 lessons that we've learned from deploying Windows 11 internally. Quick bit about us. So Rapid Circle, where we say the new Rapid Circle is because in the last few months, Rapid Circle has grown with the acquisition of Intune technology and Adopt and Embrace in Australia, as well as Portiva in the Netherlands. So it's grown from about 100 to about 350 plus in a short period of time. Which means we have now capabilities around everything to do with Microsoft 365 and other areas. So everything from traditional areas such as Exchange and SharePoint through to ever-evolving areas such as Power Platform, security, Viva, and others. And we have many competencies and certifications, but too many to list on this page. So a bit about me. My name is Lauren. As you can see, I look like the guy in the photo, just different t-shirt today. I have been working with Microsoft 365 since it was BPOS and obviously Microsoft technologies before that. So I've worked with hundreds of customers, and when I see things like Windows 11 is not just an operating system, it is part of a cloud ecosystem. So yeah, my area and focus around Microsoft 365 really flows into things like Windows 11, and that's what we see as well is we don't just deploy Windows 11 as a standalone thing, as an upgrade. It's a number of areas that need to be covered off across all areas. So Windows 11, pretty graphics. This is the flower or whatever it is that they have used. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to bring up a graphic that I actually had created around Windows 10 launch time, so a number of years ago. And especially as we're now at Windows 11, I actually created this as a joke that when the slogan, I think people were saying that Windows 10 will be the last version of Windows, which turns out is not the case, that I thought, well, what if we turn it up to 11? So a bit of a Spinal Tap reference because we have to. So the 11 tips, we have a very short period of time to go through a lot of them, and unlike usual, I'm not going to waffle. So first one to jump into is device readiness. So first thing is that Microsoft has changed the hardware specs on what's required for Windows 11 a number of times. And the important thing is to know that not all hardware is actually compatible. We found ourselves that we've had a number of Surface Pro devices that were relatively recent that actually were not compatible. So how we are able to do this is using Intune in the Endpoint Manager or Intune reports. Under Endpoint Analytics, we've got the ability to see what devices are actually compatible and not compatible and why they're not compatible. So this is crucial to look at because one of the things that we found is when we had people opting in to the upgrade was not offered to them. And why? Because TPM chip or CPU compatibility. So unfortunately, this report is actually buried under the work from anywhere area that shows the Windows 11 readiness. So it's a little bit out of the way to find it, but it is there, and that's where it can easily be found to see who can actually get the upgrade and address what's going to happen from there. So the next one is around controlling the deployment. So a lot of people will want to go out and deploy to Windows, upgrade to Windows 11 as soon as they can, because they want to see the new shiny, whereas many others will not necessarily care. So until we've covered off a lot of these things, because there are quirks with Windows 11, there's also changes, and we need to be able to be ready to be compatible. So in our business, for example, a number of people went early before we had planned for it because of certain policies, and some of those people are now actually not able to use applications that are part of their job. So one you wouldn't normally think of, SharePoint Designer 2013. We need it to upgrade SharePoint workflows from 2013 to Power Automate. Is not compatible with Windows 11. So we've had to come up with workarounds. So there's going to be plenty of applications, despite Microsoft's promise of backwards compatibility and those kind of things, that will actually not work for some reason. So how we do this is through Windows update rings and feature update policies to determine who does get to go and who doesn't get to go. So I'm not going to dive into the deep of that, but this is where we can effectively define how long people have until they can push the upgrade out and whether they can get certain updates made available to them, again, depending on hardware compatibility. And I'll show you how this actually flows into the next thing, which is the pilot phase. So we're able to use that ability to control the deployment through pilot. Now, pilot phase often is a bunch of IT guys will install it on their machines and see how it goes. The reality is, IT people are a lot more resistant to frustration and compatibility issues and quirks and changes than the average end user who just wants to do their job. So what is the benefit of pilot phase is to learn at the expense of others, because yes, we IT people can document these things, but the reality is we need actual end users to go through the experience and see what it's like. So what we did internally was we created an opt-in pilot group. So we created a Microsoft form, and we limited who had access to it. And we just simply had a workflow behind it. So instead of any manual process to say, hey, this person submitted, I'm now going to now add them to the group. What we simply had was a workflow that would then take that person who submitted the form and put them into an Azure Active Directory group that was actually used for that Intune upgrade policy that I showed in the previous slide. So effectively, within, I think most people saw the update, the ability to upgrade within about 15 minutes. So they would fill out the form and then it was done. So we will most likely use that as a way to expand this out across the rest of the organization so that people can upgrade when they want, because not everybody necessarily wants to go to Windows 11. So we can give the opportunity to roll it out further without forcing everybody to do it. Now, part of why we actually care about not forcing this upon everybody is because the start menu is not the same. So the start menu has been with us for a long time, and it's been in a certain place for a long time. So those of you who might remember Windows 3.1 will remember how it looked, and going to Windows 95 was so big it warranted licensing a Rolling Stones song and ad campaigns and Chandler and Rachel from Friends getting involved in a video and those kind of things. So we have to look at the start menu and go, well, is this a small change or a big one? So if we ever think back to Windows 95, this is what the start menu looked like, and it was a big change from 3.1. Windows 98 brought very little change to that. Then we went over to XP. Yes, there was Windows ME and Windows 2000 in there as well, but from a consumer perspective or end user perspective, XP came in relatively the same, but bigger icons, prettier, those kind of things. Moving over to Windows Vista, yes, its name shall be spoken. And then Windows 7, again, still the same, but still a bit different. We started to bring in search capabilities and those kind of things. Windows 8 was obviously a big attempt from Microsoft to change the start menu, and we went to the full touchscreen, and they got rid of the start button entirely, but brought it back in 8.1. And then Windows 10 kind of went to a bit of a hybrid place of Windows 8 and previous versions. However, in Windows 11, the start menu moves to the middle of the screen. Now, firsthand, I can say that is a big change in muscle memory because the shutdown button is not where it usually is. So I have to remember that, and I have to remember that my results come up in a certain place. What's great is I can have dark, so it looks very pretty, but it does look different. So we've moved away from the tiles look and have more just standalone app icons. So on some instances, it's not a huge change, but that movement to the center is actually a very big one, as said, for muscle memory, as a lot of people are mouse warriors. Now we can move it to the left. That can be done, but again, just something we need to consider from an education perspective of end users. Now, moving along at a rapid pace is the Microsoft Teams integration that has been boasted quite a lot in marketing materials. Now, unfortunately, Microsoft Teams in Windows 11 is not the Microsoft Teams that we would think it is. And it's been touted as being built into the operating system, and you can see this when you first upgrade because there is an icon front and center that shows this chat box that looks like the FaceTime icon, but is actually the Teams chat and video calling icon. Now, the thing with this is, as I said, not all Teams are created equal. That's because the Microsoft Teams that's built into Windows 11 is what's called Teams for personal use versus the Teams for now work or school. They've actually had to update the icon so that we can tell the difference. But as you can see, the coloring, the logo still looks quite similar. And a lot of people aren't necessarily going to recognize the difference. They're just going to start looking for Teams, type it in, and hit go. And as I said, they are not the same thing. They will not be able to sign in with their work credentials or school credentials into that Teams personal app. Now, the reality is that Teams for personal use has actually been available in the Teams work or school desktop client for some time, but it has popped out into a separate window. Here, we actually have it as a separate app. That may be confusing, especially when we want to open in Teams or share to Teams. So our approach has actually been to get rid of it, to stamp it out. I wanted to use the term virus, but it's a little bit it's too soon to use virus references. So that what we've actually done, and thank you to Paul on the call, is actually deployed a application that will detect whether the Microsoft Teams personal app is installed and remove it. Now, we currently have a scenario that we have to make another tweak to see if there's another way to stamp it out, because it comes back every time there's an update to Windows. So what our pilot group have seen is that it gets removed, but then an update comes through, gets behind the scenes, all of a sudden the app will appear, and then it will disappear because our script detects it and then moves to get rid of it. So this is something that we feel is important to do, because if we're talking about Teams, we're talking about the work version of Teams. So we don't want to confuse end users, much like we had with Skype and Skype for Business over so long of a period of time, and we'll still have with OneDrive and OneDrive for Business. So speaking of app removal, there's other apps we might want to remove at the same time that are built into the operating system by default, bundled in. So we might want to clean them up before they touch things. So some of these might be innocuous, like Xbox. You might want to remove the Xbox app because this is not a gaming computer. We don't want people using Xbox cloud games and playing Forza Horizon 5 at work, which I'd very much like to be doing right now. But more so, we might want to use it to remove things like the Power Automate desktop app. Now, not because I have an issue with Power Automate desktop or it's not a good thing to have, but maybe we're not ready for people to be running desktop workflows yet. Maybe they're not ready. We don't have a governance model, education around the compliance, those kind of things. So we can use a similar model to get rid of some of these apps, not just Xbox and Power Automate, but potentially some other apps before we actually even deploy it to end users. Conversely, we might want to use this as an opportunity to deploy apps that we maybe previously haven't. And again, because, as I said at the start, because Windows 11 is really just the desktop experience to Microsoft 365, there are experiences here we might want to help embrace users by pushing out that maybe we haven't previously because they weren't available or we just didn't do it when we upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So while they're distracted with the new shiny start menu that's sitting in the middle of their screen, we can push out these other apps and actually show people, hey, you can now actually bring Microsoft 365 more to your desktop. Don't have to necessarily use it in a browser for some of these experiences, and especially where it's apps that people may not have used previously at all. So some of these, especially, will be the less commonly used ones. So we might actually want to push out the Power Apps app, so we can actually have people running apps on their desktop. Maybe the Power BI desktop app, so that people can actually consume Power BI reports, as well as potentially create them on their desktop instead of relying on Excel, continuing to do things there. To Do is a great one as well that so many people just don't even know exists. But me personally, To Do is how I access Planner, because all my tasks show up in there. So again, a very powerful one. And the Whiteboard actually recently got an update, I think in the last week, and is in the Windows 10, sorry, the Windows version of the app got an update and is now incredibly powerful. A lot of features got added in. So a great opportunity to show people, hey, you can collaborate and access your Microsoft 365 services beyond having to necessarily go into the browser. Another opportunity we've got is to make things, again, deploy while they're distracted. We can change our security. So while we can say, hey, look over here, on one hand, we're giving you these fancy new apps and we're giving you a great desktop experience, or even replacing your device, we can, on the other hand, improve our security that maybe we haven't been able to because the change has been too great to do before. We had to drop things because of COVID and the rush to work from home. So Windows 11 really embraces the whole passwordless experience, something that Microsoft's been touting for a while. So this can be seen as an opportunity to deploy things like conditional access and to be using Windows Hello for Business and using facial recognition, or push out the Microsoft Authenticator and have a lot of different a lot of better security experiences, not just for the Windows device itself, but actually for all the other apps and services across the Microsoft 365 environment, or even beyond that if you're using Azure Active Directory to manage those things. Now, the next one, when it comes to more so around the deployment, the actual upgrade of it, because a lot of people are still working from home. You can't see with my background here, but I'm actually in the office, first time in many months. This is the second week I've come back in. But a lot of people are still working from home. And one of the things we found is that not all networks are equal. So we here in the office have hundreds of megabits at our disposal, but people at home may not have necessarily that speed as they haven't paid for it, which is understandable. Not everybody uses the internet that much. So we need to define bandwidth policies to manage the upgrade so it doesn't consume the network. As I said, because people may not necessarily have that much bandwidth available to them in the first place, but also because they may have a partner who's on video calls at work. They may have kids who are on video calls at work. And especially at this time of year, a lot of older students will be doing their or Victoria VCE subjects and will be needing that bandwidth to be available. Or there might just be somebody who needs Netflix. So we want to make sure that we can control the bandwidth policies so that during the day, only this amount of bandwidth is consumed, or after hours, this as much is consumed, or while the person is using the device, it's not consuming a great amount of bandwidth and potentially impacting their experience. So we want to configure these policies beforehand. This is actually something we learned because we didn't really consider it beforehand. As everybody was working from home, we figured it's enough. Until one person said, no, actually my calls were choppy while it was downloading the updates. So something we want to do beforehand. Now, upgrade. Do we want to actually do an in-place upgrade over the top of Windows 10, or do we want to do a fresh installation? Now, the fresh installation is not always achievable because it has a much bigger user impact. We also, have people who are remote who are not necessarily comfortable with doing a Windows reset on their device. Also, how do we get them to actually get to Windows 11 if they don't have access to things like network boot? So potentially we might need to upgrade their device and then get them to do a reset so it's a clean install. But why do we want to do a clean install at all? The reality is that there are some quirks that we have found in our experience that simply do not go away unless you do a fresh installation. We had hoped that they would have been addressed by now with various updates that may have been pushed out or hot fixes, but no, I actually myself, this machine that I am on right now, I will need to do a fresh install of it. Unfortunately, I didn't get a recording of it, but the experience that I have, and has been intermittent, not everybody has this one, but I have the experience when I click on a file in File Explorer that is synchronized to OneDrive, that my computer will sit and cycle on it for a few seconds, which means right-clicking, double-clicking, anything like that actually does not work that well because there's an extra lag in there. So for that reason, one of my colleagues, he experienced that first, and when he did a clean install, it was completely gone, whereas others have not had that at all. So it's something we need to evaluate. It can also be potentially tied to a device rollout or refresh or recycle program. So we need to be prepared. And last point is the minor nuances. These little things add up because when we're in an office, we can speak to each other. When we're at home, little things really add up and can contribute to someone's frustration throughout the day, like that clicking experience. I'm an IT person, so my threshold is quite high, and especially because I live and breathe Teams very early, not even beta version, alpha version, and other software early versions. I've just got a very high pain threshold when it comes to software bugs. It's not exactly realistic for the average end user. So something like that, especially for people who use File Explorer a lot, is going to be incredibly frustrating and add up to their daily use, to their daily frustrations, and contribute to stress and fatigue, and realistically, employee retention. So, as I said, that File Explorer right-click menu options and the menu options being different, the delay that I've got from an upgrade. But one thing, again, my personal experience that also others have validated as well, the clock. does not span multiple monitors. So right now, my laptop is sitting down here, and I have 2 monitors here. Last Tuesday, because as I said, this was the first time I was in the office recently. I don't use this laptop at home. I have a different setup, but because I was using this laptop for the first time in this setup, I was repeatedly throughout the day off from a scheduling perspective because the clock was not in front of me. So I've actually had to install a third-party clock to make it appear across both monitors, as that has also become a, I guess, eyeball muscle memory to see that the clock is in front of me. That's what the time is. I'm not going to crane my neck to the left screen and then down to the bottom right of my left screen to see what the current time is. Yes, I have a watch, but again, so that's the thing, is just that these little nuances add up, because as I said, that day I was repeatedly running behind on my own schedule and going, oh, what's that? That's the time. And yeah, so hopefully that will get fixed, but right now there is no out-of-the-box way to have a clock span across multiple monitors. So the common approach that is documented out on the net is to use a third-party one. So the call to action slide, the big sales pitch. Now there are some simple steps to get you going with Windows 11 that I've covered off. Now there are not 11 steps here, it's 2. I'm using Roman numeral and using my terrible dry humor. First one is contact us. As I said, we do everything when it comes to Microsoft 365, so we can deal with the security side of things. We can deal with the device deployment. We can deal with app packaging and or Power Apps building, or creating those workflows to get people to sign in and opt in, or building a community of champions from an adoption perspective to help people deal with this stuff. And the first thing that I would say is, heavy sales pitch aside, we can build that deployment plan in an hour. Not to say you're going to be up and running and pushing it out within that hour, but we can get that deployment plan pretty much created, looking at what steps need to be done, what are the priorities, what are the actions, what have you got in place, to get a plan in place within an hour to ensure that users have the most, I guess, I wouldn't say the most seamless experience, but the most, I guess, friction-free and frustration-free experience possible. So obviously you're going to be confined to whatever restraints we have and what capabilities we have, and that's the intent of coming up with that plan, seeing what we can do. Do we have to run a pilot? Do we have to upgrade devices? Is there an opportunity to improve security while we do it, or deploy some apps? Or are there other built-in apps that we should remove as we do this? So that's what we can achieve in under an hour, and there is no cost to that. And then we can go from there. So with that, I have gotten to the end. So if anybody has any questions, unfortunately you cannot unmute, but we do have a lovely Q&A panel. So that is a very good question, Darren. What is the performance of Windows 11 like compared to Windows 10? In all honesty, we haven't really seen people experiencing much difference, whether it's slower or faster. I guess now that one of our clients has left, we're between friends, there's a great level of ambivalence when it comes to deploying it, because the improvements that it offers, the benefits, I don't understand why it's a new operating system. It's basically just a Windows 10 feature pack. So yeah, performance-wise, I haven't seen anything. Tim, I guess you've been running it as well. Feel free to come off mute video and yeah, if you've seen anything.
It's pretty good. As far as gaming and stuff like that, I think it shines really well. I don't think there's any performance issues of going backwards. Pretty happy with it. Probably some of the nuances I missed, I put in the chat as well. I missed the right mouse on the taskbar to bring up the task manager. That's always a bit of a pain, so I might have to do a Windows X to bring that up.
I've not done that because I've always done a Control-Alt-Delete.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, I do Windows X now to bring it up, but I used to do right mouse on the taskbar.
Yep,
I think the Bluetooth connection GUI is a lot more end user friendly too. Whereas before, I think that just sort of mashed the APIs together for the programs and apps, and I think it's just more GUI centric now.